Crockett's got another hot take. No blacks and whites on a wedding cake. The Democrats' new chosen one,
Representative Jasmine Crockett has once again found herself at the center of a media storm, this time due to a resurfaced clip where she sharply criticized Florida Congressman Byron Donalds for his interracial marriage. In the clip, she questions whether Donald's perspective on historical issues stems from a lack of understanding or from his personal life choices, specifically his marriage to a white woman. The comment, dripping with insinuation, sparked a fierce response from Fox News host Greg Gutfeld, who didn't hold back in his critique. Gutfeld, known for his biting humor and unapologetic delivery, turned Crockett's remarks into a comedic spectacle, dismantling her arguments with a mix of sharp wit and pointed sarcasm. His takedown was not a gentle nudge but a full-on verbal assault, transforming Crockett's words into a punchline that resonated with his audience. The exchange wasn't just a fleeting moment on air, it became a viral sensation, with Gutfeld's roast of Crockett's rhetoric lighting up social media. Crockett, a rising figure in Democratic circles, has built a reputation for bold, often theatrical statements. Her style is loud, unfiltered, and designed to grab attention, but Gutfeld framed it as a performance lacking substance. He painted her as a politician who thrives on chaos, turning every appearance into a dramatic display that prioritizes flair over facts. In his monologue, Gutfeld didn't just mock her comments about Donalds. He took aim at her broader approach to public discourse. He described her as someone who walks into a room not with policy proposals or reasoned arguments, but with an arsenal of theatrics, hand gestures, exaggerated expressions, and a knack for turning serious discussions into something resembling a reality TV episode. According to Gutfeld, Crockett's ability to dominate a conversation comes not from intellectual rigor, but from sheer volume and unrelenting energy. The controversy didn't stop at her comments about Donalds. Crockett has also drawn criticism for remarks about Texas Governor Greg Abbott, whom she referred to as Governor Hot Wheels, in a jab at his use of a wheelchair. The comment, which she later claimed was not about his disability, was part of a pattern of provocative statements that Gutfeld seized upon. He highlighted her history of similar remarks, including a 2022 social media post where she referenced Abbott's wheels and liked comments calling him Hot Wheels. Gutfeld used these examples to argue that Crockett's rhetoric often crosses into personal attacks, undermining her credibility as a serious lawmaker. He framed her as someone who mistakes volume for validity, delivering lines with such confidence that they mask the lack of coherent reasoning beneath them. Gutfeld's critique went beyond individual comments, targeting what he sees as Crockett's broader political persona. He described her as a walking soundbite machine, someone who turns every press conference into a performance that blends outrage, identity politics, and vague accusations. In his view, Crockett doesn't engage in substantive debate, but instead performs for the cameras, using buzzwords and emotional appeals to sidestep accountability. He likened her speeches to a chaotic mix of TikTok improv and Broadway melodrama, suggesting that her style is more about generating viral moments than advancing meaningful policy discussions. Gutfeld's humor was relentless, comparing her to a performer who needs stage lights and a hype man rather than a podium and a prepared speech. One of Gutfeld's sharpest jabs was aimed at Crockett's ability to inject identity politics into any topic, no matter how unrelated. He joked that she could turn a discussion about infrastructure into a rant about systemic oppression, or blame a slow internet connection on historical injustices. This tendency, he argued, reflects a broader issue with her approach, a reliance on performative outrage over substantive analysis. Gutfeld suggested that Crockett's speeches often lack coherence, jumping from one idea to another without a clear thread, yet delivered with such conviction that some audiences are swept up in the spectacle. He compared the reaction to her speeches to a dinner party where someone makes an absurd claim, and everyone nods along out of fear or confusion rather than challenging it. Crockett's defenders, however, see her as a bold voice who isn't afraid to speak truth to power. They argue that her unfiltered style resonates with those who feel marginalized by traditional political discourse. Her supporters view her as a refreshing contrast to the polished, scripted politicians who dominate Washington, praising her for bringing passion and authenticity to her role. Yet Gutfeld dismissed this narrative, arguing that her passion often overshadows any meaningful contribution. He described her as someone who treats facts like an inconvenience, chasing them briefly before veering off into another tangent. In his view, her speeches are less about informing and more about creating a spectacle that thrives on social media. The Hot Wheels controversy wasn't the only instance where Crockett's rhetoric drew scrutiny. In another clip, she suggested that Democrats need to adopt a more aggressive approach to win elections, even joking about physically confronting opponents like Senator Ted Cruz. Gutfeld pounced on this, framing it as evidence of her reliance on theatrics over substance. He argued that her comments reflect a broader trend among some Democrats, who he claims are quick to resort to inflammatory rhetoric rather than engaging in reasoned debate. By contrast, Crockett's supporters might argue that her willingness to throw hands metaphorically speaks to her frustration with political gridlock and her desire to shake up the status quo. Gutfeld's monologue also touched on Crockett's ability to generate applause despite her missteps. He described audiences clapping for her as if under a spell, cheering for statements that, upon closer inspection, lack coherence or accuracy. He likened this to a Stockholm ovation, where people are so caught up in the moment that they overlook the flaws in her arguments. This phenomenon, he argued, is part of what makes Crockett a fascinating figure, her ability to command attention even when her points don't hold up under scrutiny. Gutfeld suggested that this dynamic reflects a broader cultural shift where charisma and confidence often trump substance in political discourse. Crockett's critics, including Gutfeld, argue that her style is emblematic of a larger problem in politics, the prioritization of viral moments over policy expertise. They point to instances where she has misspoken or made questionable claims, such as suggesting that immigrants are needed to pick cotton, a statement that sparked backlash for its historical insensitivity. Gutfeld highlighted this as an example of Crockett's tendency to speak with conviction even when her facts are shaky. He described her as someone who weaponizes confusion, turning missteps into moments of bold defiance. Yet her supporters might counter that these moments are taken out of context, arguing that her broader point about the contributions of immigrants was misunderstood. Gutfeld's takedown wasn't just about Crockett's words, it was about the persona she's crafted. He described her as a one-woman circus, someone who turns every policy discussion into a performance art piece. He joked that her speeches could use a translator, not for language, but for clarity, as her metaphors and tangents often obscure her point. He compared debating her to playing chess with a pigeon, chaotic, unpredictable, and ultimately futile. Yet he also acknowledged her staying power, noting that her ability to generate headlines ensures she'll remain a fixture in the political landscape. The clip about Byron Donald's marriage was particularly contentious as it touched on sensitive issues of race and personal choice. Crockett's suggestion that Donald's views might be influenced by his interracial marriage was seen by critics as a low blow, accusing her of perpetuating stereotypes while claiming to fight against them. Gutfeld used this to highlight what he sees as hypocrisy in her rhetoric, pointing out that her comments clash with the progressive ideals she claims to champion. He argued that her willingness to make personal attacks undermines her credibility as a voice for unity and progress. Crockett's defenders, however, might argue that her comments were meant to provoke thought rather than offend. They could point out that she was critiquing what she sees as a disconnect between Donald's political stances and his personal experiences, though her delivery was blunt and divisive. This tension between her intent and her impact lies at the heart of the controversy. Gutfeld, for his part, didn't delve into nuance, instead using humor to amplify the absurdity of her approach. He described her as someone who treats every microphone like a stage, delivering lines with the confidence of a seasoned performer, but the precision of a toddler wielding a crayon. The broader context of Crockett's rise is also worth noting. As a relatively new face in Congress, she has quickly gained attention for her outspokenness and willingness to challenge both opponents and norms. Her supporters see her as a necessary disruptor, someone who brings energy to a stagnant political system. Her critics, including Gutfeld, view her as a liability, arguing that her theatrics overshadow any substantive contributions. This divide reflects a larger debate about what makes an effective politician. Is it policy expertise in coalition building, or is it the ability to capture attention and mobilize a base?